Reiner, welcome back. Uh, let's see. Okay, yeah, totally. Let me read through it. Uh, I see. Um, I mean, I think the first thing is to clarify is what the what the desired style is of the end result, right? Um, so I think what we often see, right, is at least with like say anime, for example. A lot of the industry is moving towards using how to mix 3D into 2D. So 2D is kind of treated as the main carrier or the main platform, so to speak, and how you composite 3D into that without it being jarring. Reason why I'm bringing that up is because the opposite is totally also done, right? Um, that's like there's a lot of After Effects that are 2D effects, very 2D, not even trying to be 3D, but 2D effects that are composited onto 3D scenes to for well various reasons. So I guess the first question, so that's the first thing to identify, right? So for the first example that you bring up, 2D drawn background, 3D midground, and then the foreground being the mix of the two. In that case, what is the desired art style in that case? Is it like 2.5D if you were to I don't even know how you would necessarily define that, but um like is it supposed to be in that case is it supposed to be is it supposed to be both one or the other or neither? I guess is my question. Yeah. Um, I mean, I guess if foreground stop motion reference, in regards to the foreground stop motion reference thing, um, uh, isn't that sort of what like rotoscoping is, or am I misinterpreting what you're proposing there? Um, I might be misinterpreting what you're proposing there. Um, but yeah, I'll let you think about that, or yeah, while I do this. Ooh, excuse me. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree that in well, I agree in the sense that it's like obviously in theory these all have potential to to conserve time. Um, which is why for I want to say like early 2010s there was a lot of 3D animation where well, I guess what I mean, even now, I guess, even more recently, like I want to say, like for example, for Arifureta is a good example of it seemed very much like the production committee thought that 3D was going to be a good way to save work and well, I don't know if you've seen the dragon from Arifureta, but it just looks so bad. But no, exactly. I think for example. Um, I think, for example, there's the adaptation of Land of the Lustrous, right? Is a good example of 3D, basically full 3D animation working very well. Um, what else? What's another good 3D one? 3D anime. I don't know. But right. In theory, it has a lot of potential. Obviously, the caveat there is I mean this happens with 2D anime too, and I think the biggest example is it's not okay. I don't know if you call. I would consider it anime because of the staff involved as well as the look. But if you've watched the adaptation of the King's Avatar, or is that what it's called? The King's Avatar. I'm pretty sure it's the King's Avatar. It's the Chinese one. King's Avatar. King's Avatar. I think that's what this is, right? Yes. If you look at the adaptation of the King's Avatar, they reuse the same, like dynamic, like combat, like sequence several times, and it gets very, very, very obvious. So I guess what I mean to say is that 3D does have the potential to save a lot of time, and a lot of from what I can tell, a lot of the bottlenecks associated with that though aren't the like for example the thinking behind 3D saving a lot of time, right, is that for example if you model the character once, then you don't need to redraw it every damn time to get every direction of the character. Like that's supposed to be that's a proposed time saving measure, right? As long as you have a good model, then you should never have to remake the model. Whereas in 2D animation, you have to redraw that model from every different angle. And if you don't, then you do get a King's Avatar type situation where it gets really obvious that the same frames were reused in a different situation. But I guess what I mean to say is in practice, and I think it's possible now. But for a long time it wasn't possible just because of how animation works, right? I think the biggest example is if you watch Astro Boy. The reason why Astro Boy is so hard in terms of or for a long time was considered to be kind of the prime example of why using just a 3D model wouldn't be practical, is because Astro Boy's like hair, like not cowlick, but his hair never points at the viewer. It's always pointing to the left or right, or you know what I mean? Like it's no matter how you look at it, or how Astro Boy's never presented, or the 2D anime, the old one, or even just the comics, Astro Boy is never presented having his hair like his hair is always in that distinct shape, which is just I guess three-dimensionally impossible, right? There should be some angle that the point of the hair is pointing at you. So there should never be a situation it's not possible for that hair to always be pointing in a direction away from the viewer or not directly to the viewer, right? And that was considered a good example of how, there's similar issues with how when doing like cell shading, how to render to make sure that you only show the correct lines. And a good example of that is like Guilty Gear Zerd, I think. There's a GDC talk discussing how the rendering is accomplished and basically how it solves that problem. So I guess what I mean to say is that a lot of these how to use 3D to make it look sort of pseudo 2D are being actively solved, right? Yeah. So stop motion, it's feel off somehow from the stop motion. It makes clipping errors a little less common. Or right. So I guess what I mean to say is like right. So like well, I guess the question is so is rotoscoping more of what you're thinking then? So like, well, actually, let me double check and make sure what is encompassed by rotoscoping. Yeah, right. Yeah. So is that the idea? You take, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, just trace over motion picture footage. Yeah. Although it says frame by frame, so maybe we put the caveat that it's pseudo rotoscoping in the sense that you don't do it literal frame by frame, but only the frame is relevant. That I think would be fine, if that is what you're discussing with the second part. I think it would be fine. I think it solves a number of issues, like one being that if you were to do motion capture requires like motion retargeting. Like you have to process the captured motions before you can or after you attach it to the model. You need to kind of polish it, right? Whereas with rotoscoping, presumably if your actor or whatever your model you're using in real life just does it right, then it should just be a one-to-one conversion without any well, the only post-processing you would need is the tracing, right? So and then just some smart selection of which frames to use out of the rotoscoped or out of the reference video when rotoscoping. I think again, I think it's one of those situations where it definitely seems the more, I don't know if it's financially viable, but it seems like a little more straightforward than some of the other things, right? Yeah. I think, yeah, some mecha, especially the old ones, it's, I think I still see this with modern mecha, but I feel like sometimes the motions are like too smooth in some places and too fast in other places. Main 2D animation. Yeah, I although I think it is a matter of practicality, right? Because, I mean, I think here's one thing. I think full on like regular 2D animation would still be very much in demand if the animators were just paid well. I think at the end of the day, it's probably money, right? Like they can either there have to be more animators that are willing to just eat like instant noodles for every day for like 30 years of their life. Or there have to be more people like that, or there has to get more, there needs to be more funding for animation studios to pay animators, 2D animators specifically, better, or so on and so forth. Yeah, in terms of stop motion, I think it's one of those things where it's definitely a style that it's an artistic decision, obviously, right? But so, for example, Mob Psycho 100, right, has that one artist that does stop motion like sand art. I don't know. Do you know what it's called? I can look it up if you're interested, real quick. But there's several scenes in Mob Psycho 100, right, where they got this person who specializes in this kind of like sand stop motion art style to do some scenes. So I think it's very much like, I'm sure it won't be in high demand, but I think there will be niches where the style is necessary, or the style is most appropriate or most most appropriate. So yeah. Well, what is that style called? Mob Psycho 100 sand stop art or stop motion. Or I guess it's called paint, or it's paint? Oh, I thought it was sand. I guess it's apparently paint on glass animation. I wonder why I thought it was sand. Sorry, it was paint. I guess I must have just thought it looked like sand. But anyway. Look at this. Ooh. Yeah. You know, I think it works in both directions. I think at the end of the day, it's all has to be an intentional artistic decision, right? Like all I feel like every anime works like where clearly the budget wasn't there. Like just looking at kind of like either the production committees or the like the people involved for all these projects where the budget or at least the like the dedication of the staff isn't there. Like no matter what style they use, it can be 2D or 3D or whatever, it just looks bad. Like if the budget or the kind of emotional investment isn't there, then it really doesn't matter what medium they end up using. It just kind of looks bad no matter what. So I think at the end of the day, whatever case it is, it has to be a artistic decision, right? Okay, I won't go through the whole thing, but here. That doesn't look too bad. Sorry, what was the? I mean, they both looked good, I thought, but I mean, anyway, both styles look, I think, good. Obviously, I'm giving the older Gundam some slack. At least moment 3D ones seem too human in a way. You know, I've heard this. I've actually heard of that criticism a lot from from Gundam. Some like the 3D ones where sometimes the weight doesn't feel like it's there of the robots, and that, you know, I see where people are coming from. Yeah, it's it seems like sometimes there's a little bit of like they look more like they don't seem like they're made of, you know, they're hulking, you know, chunks of metal. Yeah, I can see that criticism. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, again, I think that's just a matter of if they, you know, had some time to put a little bit more, or if they had a little bit more time to put into it. Weird for sort of characters that are all women. I mean, if the setting calls for it, then I don't see why not. I mean, I don't see any reason for or against it. I mean, if that's just what the setting calls for, then that's just what it is, right? I mean, like, for example, does anyone question why it's all women in like a, like, you know anime that are set in like an all women's school, for example? Does anyone question why it's all women? for like cute girls do cute things type anime, does anyone question why the entire club is all women? Not really. That's just kind of what it is, right? I think it's fine as long as that's what you want to write. Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's really the point, right? I mean, like, I realize in the US there's a lot of, at least with writing stories, there's a lot of, oh, you know, there needs to be gender diversity, and, you know, there needs to be you know, you have to have strong characters or not, or, you know, whatever. And it's like, yeah, you know, I think, you know, I think it's I think I'm not, you know, trying to take anything away from, you know, discussion about like maybe like subconscious influences, and, you know, maybe like representation and so on and so forth. You know, I don't want to take anything away from that discussion, but what I will say is, you know, if someone doesn't really feel like writing something, I don't see why they should have to. Like, if there's like a, for example, if there's a representation issue, I feel like the solution isn't get someone who doesn't want to write such a character to write a character, right? Like, the solution is, you know, get someone who happens to have written a character that fits that criteria and make sure they get, you know, the recognition they deserve. Now, if the recognition they deserve is nothing, then, well, that sucks for them. But if they deserve more recognition, then I don't see anything wrong with, you know, amplifying their message to make sure they get that you know what I mean? Like, it's exactly, how do they fit in the diversity chart? Like, you know, which might be like, a diversity chart might be interesting in terms of challenging yourself to write more, you know, various characters. But yeah, exactly, made for a modern, you know, diverse audience, which, again, you know, yeah, I think, you know, if you were to ask, is there or like a representation issue, then actually, I don't know. If there's a lack of representation, then, oh yeah, the fucking diversity chart. Yeah, anyway, might have to keep doing some outdated Studio Ghibli with hand drawn. Yeah, and, you know, Studio Ghibli, I think, is a good example of where they have done they have done animation that isn't strictly 2D before, right? Like, if I understand or if I remember correctly, Howl's Moving Castle should have been 2.5D for some of the stuff, right? It's not like they don't do 2D, right? And in fact, Ghibli's the one that basically made the top line art digitization tool, right? If I remember correctly, what is it called? Studio Ghibli line art tool. What's that called? I'm pretty sure they open sourced it. OpenTunes. Yeah, Studio Ghibli is the one that made OpenTunes, right? Which is used to for to assist with 2D animation. So it's it's totally true, right? Like it's they can only do this because they have the money to. But also they very like explicitly narrowed down on a style, and it's very intentional, right? So but otherwise it's difficult. Exactly. It's very difficult without doing that. And it's still difficult even for them to the point that they need to they needed to invest money into developing tools to help with to help facilitate that, right? So uh perception of something, I mean, I think, well, perception of something, I mean, I would argue it probably does change a lot over the years, right? When my mom was really young and she still lived in the countryside in Japan, taking a bath once a week was totally normal, and you do it in the freaking river, right? Um, that's only 50 years ago or something, right? 40 years. Well, how old is she? Well, when it happened, it would have probably been something on the order of, oh, well, fuck that. Well, don't do any of the calculations that you would do to figure out what my age is, but let's just say it would have been about 50 years ago, so half a century ago. And I imagine in a lot of parts of the world, that's probably still the case, right? Um, Bro, yeah. Ooh, anyway, yeah. No. I mean, this didn't. That, and like for example, when she was a child, color TV was just, well, actually, I don't know. This was in Japan. I know NHK would have had color TV broadcasts by then, but I don't know how popular color TV would have been. But the point is that I know the tune to NHK's what do you call it? Like terrestrial broadcasting, like troubleshooting service. It was called Jushin Sodan. It was a radio program that the that's the Japanese Broadcasting Association operated until, I want to say, they operated it fairly late into, or they operated it for until fairly recently. I can't remember, but they had a tune. It goes Yoji Gofun, Yoji Gofun. But anyway, there's a whole thing. But it's called that because the radio broadcast would be at 4:00, hence Yoji Gofun, or 4:05, hence Yoji Gofun. But anyway, so, and that was only in, that would have been, they would have been operating that radio program until maybe like 35 years ago, I want to say. But like those are the standards that she grew up with versus what we grew up with, right? And even for us, I want to say that perception probably changed for, like, the big thing that changed our perception is probably going to be smartphones, right? Like the what do you call it? 35 years. Anyway, actually, what I will say is though that I shouldn't say that, but let's just say they didn't really plan to have kids, so they didn't have kids at the time that you'd expect in their life that you'd expect them to have had them. Let's just say that. But I mean, I suppose, yeah, for storytelling, perhaps. Well, I mean, actually, I would ask, has it really not changed? Because if it hasn't, that would really surprise me. Especially, say, after the advent of like word processors. Like, with word processors being more accessible, I would be surprised if there wasn't, a drastic shift in storytelling. Maybe not shift, but there would be a drastic influx in storytelling styles. No, like, I mean, these days there's even people that tell stories in the form of like blog posts, right? I mean, I think a good example is, say, like the SCP Foundation, which is basically a freaking, massively crowdsourced story. Just because there are SCPs that connect with each other, right, and stuff. So I'd be surprised if it hasn't changed. Granted, I don't do a lot of reading, so I don't know, but like I'm sure there's a lot of standard archetypes, but and actually, wait. So I thought we were talking about animation though. But anyway, so maybe storytelling hasn't had as much of a drastic shift. Let's maybe just go with that because I don't know. In terms of animation, I think like visually again, right? Like within the past 50 years, people have gone from black and white tube TVs to color TVs to LCDs to high definition or so, what do you call it? So within LCDs, then there's and I guess in parallel, we've gone from like 8-bit and like 16-bit, like like well, display systems to and like these days we have these high resolution like HDR displays. Sharp already manufactures 8K displays, or I guess 8K isn't that rare now. It's just super fucking expensive, but right. So, and then in addition to that, there's like we're just getting to the point where real-time cloth simulation is getting like viable. It's like 8 FPS, but it's semi-viable now, which is would have been unheard of maybe 2 decades ago, right? But going forward, assuming that the teams in charge of that project, I can't remember where, and you have to email them for the repo, they don't have it public, but like real-time cloth simulation, like really high density real-time cloth simulation is something that's only now becoming practical. But going forward, let's say maybe 10, 20 years from now, it's probably going to be weird to see 3D animation that doesn't have, real time, it's going to be weird to see, character models in video games that don't have, super accurate, cloth deformation and stuff, right? So, and then within the past decade, right, in terms of animation especially, it's only recently, like for example, subsurface scattering, right? Because you need subsurface scattering to be able to model, how the skin looks. Subsurface scattering wasn't really even done until, or real-time subsurface scattering wasn't really even viable until more recently, right? Obviously, big animation companies like Pixar can do it with their fucking, like supercomputer level, like, servers, but for the, for regular people, getting accurate like skin tones due to that wasn't really practical until recently either. So yeah. But anyway, so in terms of at least how like addressing the whole Gundam thing with like the looks, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's, I guess you gain some things and lose some things, right? So that probably explains why the animation looks a little bit too fluid or too organic, maybe, in the 3D modeled one, maybe because they treated it like something you would maybe motion capture with like retargeting, but maybe shouldn't have that. Or I don't know if that's what they did, but anyway. Oh, interesting. Okay. Story writing, fluff in the middle, not much plot. I agree with that. Yeah. But I guess what I wouldn't say is the flow of the story, for example, or what constitutes a valid flow. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets challenged often. I think. Yeah. Again, I haven't really read many or much of anything, especially recently. So, or at least in terms of like novels. So I can't really comment on that. But Yeah, I would be surprised if there weren't people actively testing that to see what's viable, right? Um, and then again, I don't know. I don't know what, at least with stories, because like the main thing with a story, I think that the main thing with story, right, is the main bottleneck with again with the whole thing about like not just putting a bunch of fluff in the middle, right? For example, as you say, is um, it needs to be digestible by the reader, right? And what constitutes digestible, or even leaving the realm of text, if we're talking, say, visually digestible, we can already see how that's very drastically different just by from UI designers, right? We look at, say, the blade design of the Xbox, or the first Xbox, right? I think that was the one with the blade design. Was drastic, maybe not drastically different, but it was significantly different. We look at, say, like the UI of Persona, or even just going to smartphones. You look at the UI of iPhones, which for a lot of people can be very hard to parse because there's no visual indicators. But for people that grew up with iPhones, it's totally, they can totally interpret what they're supposed to do. And then same thing with like the Persona, like the whole like dynamic. I don't know if it's considered dynamic, but I've heard someone called it a dynamic UI, right? I think for or let's take Elden Ring, or just the FromSoft software, right? Like when Elden Ring came out, people, there were a ton of people shitting on the UI, right? But I feel like players that actually like the game are like, yeah, the UI looks fine, right? So what constitutes something that can be digested, I think drastically changes, right? And if the broader that range of what can be digested is, especially let's say to bring it back to storytelling now, if people going forward are able to digest a larger variety of possible situations or possible formats, in the same way that it seems like younger people now are able to interpret UI aspects of the UI of devices, even though there aren't visual indicators, then that gives a wider realm for storytellers, right, to format their stories. Now, is that the case? I don't know, but yeah. So I guess what I mean to say is, you're right. It has to follow some rules, but what those rules are more determined by the audience, no? Because the audience is the one that reads the book and says, oh, okay, I get what's going on, or I don't, right? And I would expect what constitutes a valid story to probably broaden as time goes on, just because they'll have been exposed to prior styles, and so the precedent exists as a valid style, and then presumably you're not going to like you start, so if for someone born right now, there's going to be structures of storytelling that they've been exposed to, right, that already exist, and then assuming that they don't just retroactively say, okay, these aren't valid, then going forward as they grow, they're only going to encounter new, either the same or new, like story, what do you call it? Archetypes, maybe. So I would expect over time, on the scale of, human history, for example, for, there to just be an increase of, what do you call it? Such, rules or such archetypes, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. There now, I agree with the thing about well, that's the thing. I don't know. I've never, like I think a good example is like Steins Gate, right? Like A lot of people when it first came out called the first half of Steins Gate the slower, like pointless part, where it's not, right? Because you need the first half. The first half kind of establishes, you know, who the characters are, or what or how they are, and you know, while also kind of laying the foundation for that the latter half of the plot, right? So I do agree that you know, it can't just be arbitrary. It needs to have some purpose. So yeah, I agree with that. But I guess what, you know, like but what constitutes, again, again, this is just going to back to the whole what was it? Uh yeah, so just going back to the whole point about how, like, what people consider a good story. I guess, you know, again, so kind of tying back to that, at least in terms of what people consider a good story, I would expect that, and this, there's no proof to this, obviously, right? I would have to do you know, I'd have to do like a case study or something, but to at least even get an inkling of what this should be. But my gut instinct, just judging by other fields, would be that what defines or what constitutes a what do you call it, a good story should, that definition I would expect to broaden over time, is I guess my point. Maybe not quickly, maybe not to the same, maybe not at the same rate as some other things, but I would in general expect that definition to broaden over time. So if like one, if, you know, if it seems like there's a drastic change in like storytelling, actually I don't even know if that's the point that you were getting at, but anyway, yeah. I mean, again, I'm not a writer, right? So I can't really comment on a lot. Or, I mean, I don't have anything. What do you call it? I'm not an authority figure on the matter, right? So obviously, I can't, you know, claim, you know, anything to be definite or, you know, true. But yeah, like, I mean, whatever the case is, I think the core point remains, right? Things need to be done with purpose. Whether that purpose is, you know, choosing 2D or 3D, or 2.5D or some other D, or even not even animation. It can be rotoscoping or hand done or whatever, or like, you know, and then again with what plot or what flow a story takes, then, you know, it has to be done with purpose, right? Whether that purpose is, you know, well, whatever that purpose is. The purpose could be there is no purpose, but that's still a purpose, right? Yeah. Let's see, so I'm wondering how. Same much to this one. I mean, subject. Oh, right. Yeah. So I mean, so that's, I mean, fine. No. So just means that that attempt didn't work out. I mean, I feel like a story. I mean, sorry. This is just kind of maybe not a nitpick, but just a small pick at the last part of what you're talking about here. Like, a good story doesn't need to necessarily say anything, does it? I mean, obviously people are gonna probably, like a story more if it has some nice message attached to it or some, something. But that doesn't necessarily. I would assume that. I mean, I wouldn't. I guess what I mean to say is, I don't necessarily see why a good story needs to have a specific. What do you call it? Statement or like yeah. Right. We don't know. So right, yeah. It's hard to tell. Sorry, I don't know what this specific one you're referencing to anyway is. So I can't really comment on even what I think of it, right? Because I don't even know what the movie you're talking about. Or I haven't watched this movie that you're talking about, presumably. So. Yeah. Although again, what I would expect or my instinct would be that as long as there's something that can be tied to like someone's like lifetime or their individual story, so to speak. And what do I want to say? I guess what I mean to say is that the tenets that you mentioned, I mean, I don't really know if there's a list of storytelling tenets, but anyway, I imagine there are if they're called tenets, but like, I guess the question is, can you still write a good story while not using any of those tenets? Then my guess would be, or here's what I guess my instinct is that those tenets probably fall within the realm of something relatable to like human experience, right? I would expect those tenets to fall within that range. So the question is, then to not use those tenets, I guess would mean, can you tell a story that's perceived as, or that can be perceived as good without relating it or having it be foreign to the human experience, perhaps? That's what it's called. Oh, okay. It's with two N's. I see tenet with one N. I'm having trouble finding tenet with two N's. Maybe I need to put... Sorry, can you link the IMDb or something? Oh, it is one N. Oh, okay. Is it this 2020? It says 2020 science fiction action thriller. That is a lot of words. Maybe not. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I was expecting it to be something more maybe esoteric, but I guess it's kind of anyway. Oh, okay. Misunderstood what you said. Okay. Well, I guess misinterpret. So, anyway. But yeah, and like in terms of storytelling, yeah, I mean, I mean, personally, I think people should just. Well, I guess what I want to say. I guess I just want to say like. I mean, it's part of it probably is. Part of it probably is just money, right? It's a job at the end of the day. So I mean, if it wasn't a good maybe it was just a movie to just pay the bills, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. Um, yeah. Also, I don't think Hollywood is a good place to find good stories. If I'm going to be honest, like again, I don't think I've I just I just don't think Hollywood is a good place or is the place to be looking for well thought out plots and stuff. This might be a little maybe not the best way to phrase it, but I mean, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these movies just need to make money, right? So, um, yeah, and I think that's fine too because, again, the whole thing about like what's easily digestible, like maybe this I'm kind of skimming the plot here. Maybe this story doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe not. Maybe it makes sense, but I guess what I mean to say is maybe it's not a great story, but I mean it's a story that got written and presumably because its budget or its box office, you know, revenue is more than its budget, then I assume it at least at least made money back. So I mean, uh, it's never, yeah, well, yeah. Although I think in this case maybe the phrase would, or the more apt phrase would be that there's a, you often hear this about like jobs or even just any action that produces a product, but the saying goes, don't let perfection be the wait, no, is it don't let yeah, it's don't let perfection get in the way of good enough, is the phrase. Or something to that. I guess it derives from perfect is the enemy of good. But right, like, like like maybe it was some attempt at trying to make a good story out of what is considered not a good story. Maybe it's just a mediocre story just to pay the bills. Maybe it's something in between there, or maybe it's neither. I don't know, but yeah. So I guess this movie isn't good. So I'm just kind of skimming the rest of the Wikipedia article, but I guess just Enemy isn't that good. um, oh, really interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, like, I wouldn't hold it against him. And maybe some people really like it, right? I mean, the cover looks cool. So, and I see CIA and some like Russian stuff. Or is it Russian? I don't know. See CIA, I see some Russian looking names. No, this guy's Indian. But anyway, yeah. Yeah. Again, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, again, I think I still wouldn't really, if it is an attempt at kind of, you know, kind of breaking the mold of what's considered a good story, then, you know, like, I mean, it's someone else's money. Like, who cares? Yeah. Yeah. You watch it twice to start to get it. I mean, I think that's fine. Um, I mean, there's plenty of YouTube channels that show that people really love that kind of stuff, right? It's like, oh, the 10 things you missed about so and so movie, or right, like, or you know, like, or like all the conspiracy theory channels that are about that are like, oh, you know, this thing, this part of that movie actually means this. It's like, or like game theory is a perfect example of like the fact that people really like to like read deeper into into this media, right? So I mean, if anything, if the story needs to be watched multiple times to really start to get it, and people actually do pay tickets to watch it multiple times, then if anything, that's probably smart in terms of like a business decision, right? Because it means people are going to keep watching the movie. So maybe that was the strategy all along. Make it sound super complicated so that people keep buying tickets. Man, the thing is, I kind of worry that that's actually kind of the direction some of these franchises are going to go toward, because I feel like it makes too much financial sense. Just have a known IP that's good, make a super complicated movie that needs to be like watched like multiple times to you know, like so they just keep buying tickets, and it's like, you know, yeah. Actually, that's why I think Steins Gate did a really good job, because I feel like with Steins Gate, yeah, you can watch it multiple times to get more out of the show, but in terms of like the main, you know, plot points, you know, that was something that I could understand on the first run through the show. So, you know, without any extra help. Now, you know, there's more things that you catch on through multiple, you know, watch throughs, but in terms of the main watch through of like Steins Gate, I feel like it doesn't seem like an ass pull or anything, or the story, you can follow the story, I think, even on the first watch through. So I mean, I guess there were some people that couldn't really, so maybe that's kind of dependent on how you watch it or when you watch it, or but yeah. Yeah, and I suppose that's probably where the skill of the storyteller comes into play, right? Like how much depth you can put into a story while still keeping it approachable. Probably should get back to work. Yeah, although my throat's so fucking thirsty. Let's see. Or my throat's dry. I guess what I want to say. Let's see. I can make some more hot cocoa. Yeah, Steins Gate, it is kind of funny, like, where is the beginning? But, yeah, see, REA sounds good. So I'm gonna make some hot cocoa first. Yeah. Yeah, the can of, or sorry, the bag of hot cocoa that I bought is, it's kind of strong, so I've been splitting each bag of hot cocoa into 2 cups just to make it less, it's too chocolatey, is I guess the point. Yeah. Movies are so expensive these days, though. Actually, now that I think about it, is there any difference between hot cocoa and hot chocolate? Or sorry, not hot cocoa, milk chocolate and hot cocoa? Milk chocolate and hot cocoa, yeah. Or chocolate milk, or chocolate milk, hot cocoa. There we go. Words. Because I just realized it kind of seems the same. Also, this isn't mixing that well. Yeah, I should have heated up the milk first. Oops. Oh yeah, this is gonna tank the connection for a few seconds. Start cooking the hot cocoa. It looks like it kind of started cooking the chocolate. Try mixing it again. I think it did. I might need to do it one more time. But yeah, so the reason why, I mean, I guess it's not really necessary to explain, but the reason why is because the Wi-Fi card that I'm using is, I'm not streaming yet. Am I? Am I streaming already? Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, now it's connected to Twitch, I think, or at least Restream shows me connected to Twitch, so hopefully it's connected now. But although it's gonna die one more time so I can mix this fully. But the reason why, right, is I'm using a single band Wi-Fi card, so like a 2.4 gigahertz one. Why? Because it was the only one I dug up out of the out of all the junk parts that I had, or it's the only one that I have. But anyway, but that happens to be at a frequency that the microwave operates at, right? So if I do just buy like a 5 gigahertz or 6 or like a Wi-Fi 6 card or like a dual band card, then technically there wouldn't be any interference. Case in point, my iPad doesn't get any interference from that microwave because it has a dual band Wi-Fi card in it, right? So, or Wi-Fi antenna in it, so. Or Wi-Fi card, yeah, called a Wi-Fi card, yeah. So really, I should just buy one. So I might just buy one on why did I put in eBay? I meant Amazon. I've been meaning to buy some stuff on Amazon anyway, so Yeah, but it's like, no, really, it's just the only reason why that happens is because I'm too much of a cheapskate to spend $20 buying a dual band Wi-Fi card. Really, that's all it is. Although now that I think about it, I should have ordered something before this weekend because because otherwise, Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales are gonna totally like congest the shipping network. So I should order this quickly. Let me heat this up one more time.